Last night, pursuant to a search warrant, the FBI confiscated the phone of Mike Lindell, the founder of MyPillow and a prominent ally of former President Donald Trump, who's been a staunch promoter of the false claims about the 2020 election. This is a big deal, since Lindell is the latest in a string of members of Trump's inner circle to have either their homes or phones searched and or seized. Lindell said that federal authorities confronted him at a Hardee's drive-thru after initially resisting and attempting to get the agents to arrest him. Lindell said he gave up his phone. Lindell says the FBI questioned him about his ties to Tina Peters, a county clerk in Mesa County, Colorado, who is under state indictment on 7 felony charges stemming from an alleged scheme to breach voting machines after the 2020 election as part of a harebrained attempt to prove the 2020 election was literally rigged. Now, remember, this means the DOJ has presented to a judge evidence of a crime being committed to get that search warrant. For the past couple of months, one member of Trump's inner circle after another has found themselves in the crosshairs, not just of subpoenas, but where warrants were issued. Starting with Trump's former attorney, John Eastman, and former acting assistant attorney general, Jeffrey Clark. Back on June 22nd, both men had their phones confiscated and Clark had his home searched. Eastman and Clark were heavily involved in Trump's efforts to try to overturn the 2020 election, with Clark reportedly pushing Justice Department officials to make wild allegations in court filings and special counsels while Trump was still in office. And Eastman having drafted the infamous memo with a scheme on how Mike Pence could block certification of the election results. Then on August the 9th, one day after the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago, Pennsylvania Congressman Scott Perry had his phone seized as well. Perry was a close ally of Clark's and is believed to be heavily involved in the effort to overturn the election as well. But then last week, 2 more Trump allies, Boris Epshteyn, an attorney who helped coordinate Trump's legal strategy, and Mike Roman, a key Trump campaign strategist, both also had their phones taken. The New York Times uncovered emails, including Epshteyn and Roman, in which campaign surrogates spoke candidly about the scheme to put forth fake electors. In one email, Jack Wilenchik, a Phoenix-based lawyer with ties to the campaign, spelled out the plan to Epshteyn by writing, quote, "We would just be sending in, quote, fake electoral votes to Pence so that someone in Congress can make an objection when they start counting votes and start arguing that the fake votes should be counted." Now, also last week, the DOJ issued around 40 subpoenas, with the New York Times reporting that at least 20 of them sought information about lawyers who took part in the fake elector scheme, including Rudy Giuliani and John Eastman. And then finally, last night was Mike Lindell. Now, all along, I've told you that I still doubt that Donald Trump will actually be indicted for anything related to the effort to overturn the election, including January 6th. But the same does not go for his allies. This round of seizures and search warrants show that the FBI is really drilling down on this fake elector scheme, where fake electors in certain swing states went to great lengths, including submitting formal-looking documents with names of people claiming to be the Electoral College electors in battleground states that went to Biden. They tried to have the vote counts ignored and instead just have Mike Pence or Congress declare Trump the winner. Joining us now is Ryan Barber. He's the Justice correspondent for Insider. Ryan, thanks so much for coming on the program. Appreciate it. All right, so we've been trying to figure out what this all means, right? And seizing a phone of a very close ally of the former president is a big deal. It's an even bigger deal to search their home, as we saw in the case of Jeffrey Clark. So what does this tell us about where they are with this part of the investigation?
It really just tells us about how far along they are. One of the things that a lot of former Justice Department officials are saying, not just with these seizures of phones of Trump allies, but also the search of Mar-a-Lago in the separate documents matter, is that the stakes are so high for the Justice Department right now. If they don't have the goods, if they don't have the evidence to back this up, they are handing Trump and his allies a huge weapon to say, hey, we're being mistreated. But we're seeing time and time again that every time the Justice Department does act on these things, they are finding the skeleton in the closet. The closet is not empty. So it really just speaks to how that temperature of legal jeopardy for for Trump and his aides really is escalating to a very uncomfortable point. It's getting to a place where you can't throw a dart at the map at a map of the United States without finding a place where the FBI has searched a home, seized a phone. They're building up quite the collection of cell phones belonging to Trump allies.
Well, here's why, to me, the document case is very different in terms of a prospective outcome. Yeah. Meaning, in the document case, the FBI could make the argument down the road, we just wanted to get the documents back. It was very important for us to have them, to assess the national intelligence implications, and at that point, we decided, we're not going to charge anyone with that particular crime. The fake elector scheme is different, in my view, based on how many people they're targeting, how many phones they've seized, the homes that they have searched, and I have got to believe, and again, I'm the one who's saying I do not think that Donald Trump is likely to be indicted. I seem to be in the minority on that. I do think that it is now very likely that there will be indictments in connection with the fake elector scheme.
Yeah, and I happen to agree with that. I think that the Justice Department really is going to have a tougher time getting to the point in the January 6th investigation of charging Trump. But I completely agree with your assessment as well, though, that by no means rules out charges against the ones below him. And we have seen that, we've seen these homes be searched. We have seen this we've heard about this remarkable scene at a fast food restaurant last night where FBI agents swarmed Mike Lindell. Again, they would not be doing this if they didn't feel like they could back it up, because the downside risk is just so high. What I'm increasingly thinking about with January 6th and that investigation is the timing of it, how soon we may see charges. It's the big question marks hanging over this, of all these people whose phones are being seized, whose homes are being searched, who may flip, who may the Justice Department develop the most leverage on to really kind of send this investigation into a much more aggressive path. Who might plead guilty first, things like that.
Do you disagree with me? I do not think that there will be any indictments of Trump's inner circle specifically for January 6th. I do believe that there will be indictments in connection with the fake elector scheme. Do you disagree with me?
So it's a little hard to disentangle them, because with January 6th, the idea was that to give Pence this power to pause or delay the certification. Hey, we need to consider these fake electors. I guess I'm thinking about it in terms of under the bigger umbrella when we give the January 6th label. Yeah.
Right.
But I think you're right that the fake elector scheme is really where the rubber meets the road.
Right. And again, the reason I'm distinguishing between the two is because when I talk about January 6th, I'm literally talking about the 6th of January and not figuratively, right? And that's a different thing from the ongoing effort. Because the thing that's going to make this fake elector thing so hard for them to get around is you got the papers, you got the documents, you have it being sent to governmental bodies, et cetera. There's no ambiguity there. But look, some people are saying that with regard to other issues here, but I think it's very important, because this is such a big deal when you're talking about the former president, that we be very careful, and you are being very careful in the way that we discuss the possibilities here. But when you have this much activity going on with seized phones of close allies of the former president, I have just got to believe that something is coming. We shall see. Ryan Barber, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.